Hello everyone, welcome back to Hockey Hub. Starting this week, we're going to try to be releasing videos every Monday and Friday. A lot going on in my life personally with a relocation back to Hawaii, but stay tuned. We're going to have lots of great content for you guys, including some funny shorts, some in-depth analysis, especially covering the Hurricanes, and some league speculation and things that are going on there. Starting with that, let's go into what's going on in the league right now. It seems like there's only a handful of teams that are truly out of the playoff race going into the first week in December. Historically speaking, normally Thanksgiving is normally the cutoff where they say 70% of the teams that are in the playoff race or in the playoff picture at Thanksgiving normally end up making it. But it sort of seems like that trend has sort of changed with how much parity there is in the league, meaning how close all these teams are. When I'm looking over at the standings here, even in the East, last place Buffalo Sabres have 24 points, but the Pittsburgh Penguins at Wild Card 2 have 29. So Buffalo at 10, 11, and 4 with 24 points is only 2 wins really behind the Pittsburgh Penguins. So that means, from what I can tell, is that all of these teams are so close together. It's why I don't think there's been any truly big trades that have happened yet. I think once we get closer to the Olympic break, come maybe December, or I guess maybe the end of December, beginning of January, is when we're really going to see some more transition where teams they sort of kind of know what they are more at that point in time. Because, like I sort of said in my last video, I don't necessarily think Buffalo is the worst team in the Eastern Conference. I don't think that we have a clear-cut. Maybe the first time in a while, we don't have a clear-cut worst team. And if it is, it's not Buffalo. I actually probably think it's a little bit closer to Toronto based on what we've seen. With all that being said, the West is not too much different, right? With Chicago holding the last playoff spot at 27 points and the Nashville Predators having 20, right? 8, 13, and 4 is what the Nashville Predators are, and the Chicago Blackhawks are 11, 9, and 5. So this truly means to me that there is a lot of parity amongst the league. Everyone's sort of kind of close. Everyone's sort of kind of in it. And like we saw with Buffalo last week being the Hurricanes, and even the Rangers being the Hurricanes, we see that there is any team on any given night can sort of kind of win. And I think that's why most of us love this sport. Is no team is truly ever out of it. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and dig into the Hurricanes analysis and what's been going on with that. So, last Sunday, the Hurricanes lost to the Buffalo Sabres, and Frederik Andersen didn't look great. I think a lot of us sort of kind of saw that as maybe the first game where, I've been calling for it for a while, that Andersen sort of kind of looked a little rough around the edges. Maybe it was time to move on from him. But I think that was the first time as a fan base, all of us sort of kind of looked at the situation and said, man, this guy just isn't where he needs to be. Not where we're expecting our top-tier goaltender to be at, right? In that game, we saw a lot of issues, right? We saw Stahl. This was one of the first games that Stahl wasn't available for. That sort of kind of happened last minute, so they really didn't have an opportunity to pull anyone up to be able to do that. I also saw that it looked like there's deep pairing issues. I felt like the D weren't consistent. I feel like I would like to see more from certain players, less from others. Keandre Miller, I think, has stepped into his role nicely as being really that, with Slavin gone, he's sort of our go-to guy between him and Gostisbehere. But I'm still wanting to see like that next gear from him. But I will say this, between him and Gostisbehere, the offensive capabilities that they have is huge for the Hurricanes. It allows the Hurricanes to really push from, not only from, if their forwards aren't going, push from the defensive side of things. Defeat the defenseman can score as well. We've seen that with Keandre Miller. We saw that with Gostisbehere. Gostisbehere at one point in time, I think, had like 3 goals in like 3 games. So he's contributing offensively, and it's really helping the Hurricanes be able to get through this rough spell without Slavin. But with that being said, you're sort of wanting more from your offense, right? And we sort of kind of saw that a little bit later in the week when the Hurricanes played the Rangers, right? They ended up losing 4-2 in a game that the Hurricanes just didn't look good. It looked like they never were able to get to their game. Whenever the Rangers come in to Carolina, it always ends up feeling a little bit more like a home game for the Rangers than it is an away game. It's based on the fact that we've got a stupid amount of these of Yankees down here, right? And a ridiculous amount of Northerners, New Yorkers especially, who end up finding themselves in the triangle because of RTP and the universities, right? So with all that being said, you sort of have to know that you have to be on at that game. And the Hurricanes just came out flat. Like, they had a couple of little streaks where it looked like they were maybe figuring it out. But then they ended up just falling flat and losing 4-2. And what was most disappointing in this, really, was Anderson's effort. 17 shots, 14 saves, 3 goals in. It felt like we're sort of kind of seeing what I've been talking about for a while, which is that the goaltending is just sort of kind of starting to be up in the air, right? We don't really have anymore a clear-cut number one goaltender. And some would argue that in previous seasons we haven't had a clear number one goaltender, but this is the first time that a majority of us are now agreeing, yeah, look, we just don't have what we need, right? And which always, I'm going to start this little segment called Quotes of the Week, right? Which is in the engagement I have with hockey fans, especially Hurricanes fans, hearing what they have to say, hearing their opinion, right? So I wrote this down, and it sort of kind of took me by surprise because there's a level of arrogance in it that I just didn't see coming, right? So the guy says, so I posted a video actually stating Anderson's numbers, which are miserable, right? I think at that point in time it was a 3.07 goals against average. I want to say it was an 870 save percentage, which is atrocious, right? So he says, so I won't list off the name of the guy, but he says to me, please show me in that number how many were 2-on-0s, breakaways, backdoor screens with no eyes, etc. Yeah, it doesn't as a goaltender. As a goalie dad, I've learned a long time ago that goalie stats and goals against averages don't mean shit. So once again, in respecting of this guy's name, I'm not going to throw him any further under the bus than what I already have. Essentially, what I said and what I think a lot of people end up saying as well is, man, we're not talking about kids' stats. We're talking about playing at the highest level of competition. Yeah, when you're 12 years old, goaltender stats don't matter that much. You're just happy to have somebody in there, especially playing in North Carolina. But if we're going to sit here and say that, no, those stats don't matter, no, they do matter. That every goaltender is going to be facing a 2-on-1. Every goaltender is going to be facing a breakaway. And this is when I sort of, once again, going back to this previous video I made on him, it's not necessarily like a huge deal that these goals occasionally go in. It's that you need him to occasionally make the stop on it. You need someone who's going to be able to come into the situation and be able to actually make the save. And so historically, we've gotten that from Anderson. We've gotten that from Kochenkov. This season, we're not getting it. With Kochenkov still being out, we don't know what this looks like anymore. So it's been an up and down road for sure with what was going on. So after that, we did have Bussy did come in. Brandon Bussy, who I had sort of kind of made a couple comments that saying, like, I don't know where he is or how he is. He came in against the Jets, looked really good. 1 goal and 13 shots. Did a really good job. Jarvis ended up having a hat trick, which was great to see. I think most of us know that Jarvis I think Jarvis is going to end up being the superstar on this team. I think Aho is going to be considered a great player, and we sort of hoping that Svechnikov was going to be a superstar, but I just don't think he has it in him. But Jarvis is the guy right now for the Hurricanes. So with all that being said, Jarvis and what Jarvis has done with that hat trick is he's really started kind of cementing himself as a leader on this team, and especially in a game like that one where the Hurricanes still didn't have Stahl. So we're looking for leaders. We're looking for players to step into that position who can sort of kind of take the bull by the horns and say, "Let's go, guys! I'm going to be the one driving this bus." And it's been great to see Jarvis sort of kind of step up into that leadership position. It's once again why I sort of kind of say, like, no offense to Aho, I think Aho is a great player for us, but I don't know if he's captain after Stahl. If once Stahl retires, more than likely at the end of next year, I don't think Aho is the clear cut. I think you're more likely to give it to Slavin, and after Slavin, I think the next person you give it to is Jarvis. He seems like he has that go-getter mentality that we don't that we need. And I fear that Aho is going to take the Teravainen route and how he's going to fade as time sort of kind of progresses. Where, mind you, he still has to compete. He's still playing hard and whatnot, but it just seems like he's not 100%. I don't know how else to sort of kind of put it besides that way. It looks like he's a little bit. He's always still making an extra pass. He looks like a lot of these plays just aren't as crisp as you would want them to be. And when you have your first line center, like you know, the Flames game was yesterday, right? You would expect your top line to be going like hard against a Flames team that's depleted, that's losing left and right. And yes, like I just said about the parity in the league and how close each team is to one another. But that was a game that the Hurricanes should have won. And it should have won handedly. And not being able to see that from them, you know, it's crazy. Like I said, like with where the Flames are at 8-13-4 playing in the West, you know, and us being really the cup contending team, the favorites out of the East, you sort of kind of expect that to be an easy game for us. So not having that, not seeing that, it's a little bit frustrating. That being said, with that, I guess, is just I think that the roster needs not necessarily the roster, but definitely the lineup needs a shakeup. I feel like these lines have become sort of kind of stale. We've now seen the emergence of Ehlers, and he is as advertised, which is great to see because after some of those first couple of weeks, he looked a little bit rough. He looked like he was still trying to figure it out, but now he looks like he has a place in here. Points I want to say in almost 10 straight, if I'm not mistaken. He's looked good. He's played well. Overtime winner yesterday, which, you know, I don't know if you get that from some of the other players on the Hurricanes team. That was he didn't give up on the play as he was crashing the net. And when you think of Nikolai Ehlers, you don't necessarily think crashing the net type of player. So having him sort of kind of have that commitment, see it through to score the goal was awesome. And it's definitely something that the Hurricanes desperately needed and definitely something that's going to help them long term. What else do we have on yesterday's game? So I think that the biggest reason why I'm thinking that the Hurricanes need a little bit of a lineup shakeup, not necessarily like trade away this player, just like switch the lines up a little bit, is just because against a bad team they didn't have but maybe 20 shots on net. And maybe that's, you know, I just seems like there were too many opportunities they had to pass the puck and they weren't wanting to move the puck. They were wanting there's a clear-cut opportunity to pass it. They force a pass, and then they force an extra pass that wasn't needed as opposed to just taking the shot that's given to you. Hurricanes' bread and butter is the amount of shots that they get on net, and sort of wearing down the goaltender. The philosophy is, for those of you who don't play, right, when you put on average 35 to 40 shots a night on a goaltender, right, each little save is like chipping away at that energy bar, right? Each one's harder and harder, and the hope is that by the time that 10-minute mark in the third period hits, the goaltender has seen 30, 35 shots on net. Who knows how many have gone in? That his energy level is so depleted that those reaction times are just a little bit slower. And now you have your openings, right? Now he's cheating a little bit. Maybe his stick's not on the ground. Maybe he's not hugging that post. And now there are openings to score. So not taking those shots, which has always been the Hurricanes' like bread and butter, it ends up hurting us. So I'm not exactly sure why or where or how we ended up in a position where I think at the end of the first period we had 7 shots on net. You know, something that we haven't, as Hurricanes fans, we haven't seen in years. I would love to know the stat on how long it's been since the Hurricanes have had that few amount of shots on net. But with all that being said, I do feel like the Hurricanes are treading in the right direction. But one of the big topics I wanted to talk about is there's still a good amount of rumblings after the comment came out, you know, about 10 days ago, that Svetch had talked about wanting to go through and possibly be moved at the start of the season. I don't think the Hurricanes will eventually move him, but I do think, and based on the rumblings that I'm hearing, that the Hurricanes have been talking to the Vancouver Canucks about Elias Peterson. I think that is maybe one of the only trades that I would see the Hurricanes doing, where they're clearly a better team afterwards. You know, there's very few players out there that are similar age, still, because Svechnikov still has a lot of upside, right? So if we're going to talk about potentially moving him, you have to make sure that that return is just top notch, because he could easily go to a different team and put up 35, 40 goals. I don't necessarily think, like we sort of kind of mentioned in one of our last videos, Brind'Amour's system is not consistent with taking a superstar and letting that superstar thrive. It's more of a team game. It's more of a team structure. It's four lines rolling. It's that power play time is split 50-50. There is no one who's carryover from power play 1 to power play 2. So that style of play is Patterson, he's going to end up taking probably a cut in point production, but he also would be more successful here than what he would be in Vancouver. So I think that more than likely the Hurricanes aren't going to pull the trigger on anything like that, but it is sort of fun to think about if there are players out there. I do think that the primary concern isn't necessarily figuring out Svechnikov's situation. It's really to address the center position. I don't think the Hurricanes need to focus on adding another winger. They need to add a center. So that brings up Kadri as like the first thing that sort of kind of comes out to my mind. Especially getting a good look at him last night. He's a gritty guy, and I think that he's the type of player that would thrive under a Brind'Amour system, and on top of that, bring a little bit of extra grit that the Hurricanes are desperately needed. I think Stankoven has done well at center. I don't necessarily see Stankoven as an issue, but I think long term, if you want me to be honest with you, I think that once Stahl, ends up retiring, and now you've got that third line opening. I think the third line center opening. I think that's perfect spot for Stankoven. I think he's not going to be able to shut people down, right? He won't be that shutdown player that Stahl is. Stahl's come around once in a generation, right? If you think about like the last just amazing, solid like defensive center that we've seen. We got Barkov in Florida, right? But after that list gets a lot longer as far as how long has Stahl been in the league shutting down players and doing it consistently. So whenever Stahl retires, it's going to be a giant hole in our lineup. So someone like Stankoven coming in, we're not expecting him to be able to fill that void, but to be able to come in, score some points, be gritty, be hard to play against, and in that third line role, because that third line role it's gonna change from being a shutdown line to more just like a checking line. And the difference for those of you who are a little bit newer to hockey, right? Shutdown line is, hey, we're putting out our third line Stahl, right, against your top line, and let's see who wins the battle, right? When your third line, you don't have that shutdown line like what we've had, it becomes more a checking line, and that checking line it's a bunch of guys who are going to go out there. You're not expecting them to score. It's nice if they do, but the expectation isn't for them to score. It's for them to sort of kind of go up against the other team's third line. Before we had Stahl, right? Now, mind you, this is, 2009, 2010, right? The third line was normally made up, and even still, like when Stahl first got here, he was more of a second line center for us than he was a third. Historically speaking, the third line has normally been slotted for your younger guys who are coming up who have high potential. So that might end up being a Bradley Nadeau type of spot, right? It's a spot that's normally made for, maybe that's one of your Martin being on the third line winger is like as perfect as an example as you can get of what you want from it, right? A gritty guy, he could chip away, he could score some goals, but that is the whole point, right? Is like that is the type of player you want there. So Stankoven's sort of kind of developing over this next couple seasons. Ideally, you have to fix the second line center position. My last video I stated that, hey, I think the best thing for the Hurricanes to do is to really go out there and try to find a true number one center, and then bump Aho down to the second line, because I think in a second line role we can get a Sebastian Aho who's going to put up 90 to 100 points based on his ability, because he's not drawing in the top defensive pairing every single night. But I think that the Hurricanes have some hard decisions to make. One of my biggest pet peeves with the Hurricanes right now is that too much of our lineup is locked in, right? Really, the top 9 is locked in through the end of next season. And then you've got players like Kakiniemi, who right now isn't even playing because he's injured, but Like, we've healthy scratched him. He's making $5 million a year. So where do you use him? Because my biggest fear is this: is the Hurricanes have done, which I don't agree with, is we have a stockpile of NHL talent that's playing at the AHL level. These are players that they need to be developing at the NHL level at this point. There's only so far you're going to be able to like develop at the AHL level. You have to play against better players to be able to get better training. And I think, everyone talks about, playoff window or championship window. The championship window, I'm sort of torn between it, right? When Stahl leaves this team, it will be closed. That's sort of how I feel, the initial feeling. But the other half is we have so much young talent in the pipeline already that there isn't no rebuild that's going to happen. There's nothing of that sort. It's just going to be, I think, a 2-year window after Stahl retires, where Hurricanes weren't going to be contending quite yet. But it's because their younger players are catching up. They're figuring it out. So maybe this team is third in the division, wild card 1. And that's why I think it's so important now for the Hurricanes to address the elephant in the room, which is goaltending. Now, Bussy's doing an amazing job so far, but what happens when we get deeper into the playoffs? And this is where my fear is, because we've seen Anderson struggle with it, we've seen Kochenkov struggle with it, where if the offense isn't bringing it, these goaltenders aren't able to win us 2-1 games. And that's where the Hurricanes have gotten themselves into a little bit of trouble, which is they're not finding that level of energy, they're not finding that level of compete, and now they're needing the goaltenders to steal a game, and they can't. So there are definitely spots on this roster that need to be addressed immediately, being goaltending, and long term being the center position, right? Where I'm hoping that at the end of the day, some players are going to have to get moved. Like, I love the Taylor Hall signing. I thought that what a great third line guy to have on your team, but right now we have him on the fourth line. And I think that he's one of the players who, in all honesty, has looked consistently the best. I don't necessarily know why he's not on the second line. I know why he's not on the second line, right? Because, who are you moving then? You can't move Blake to the third or the fourth line. But, so you can't really justify that. You're not moving Ehlers off of the second, right, with what you're paying him. And it's clear that Ehlers isn't working out in the first, which is why I think you have to do, and this is why I am suggesting a sort of kind of a throw in the blender type of mentality here. I would sort of like to see Ehlers and Svechnikov play together, even though they both occupy the same wing. I think that I almost would want to say putting, it's sort of a weird idea, but putting Stankoven with Svechnikov on one side, Ehlers on the other, and then Jarvis and Blake for the first line, I feel like that might be a solution that might actually benefit. I think that Jarvis is sort of kind of becoming more of a straight line, up and down type of player, which is what the Hurricanes desperately have needed for a while after we traded away Natchez, right? Is we don't have that ability, the guy to get the puck on a stick and then just fly up through the neutral zone, not looking to pass, looking to just get zone presence, right? So I think that having Jarvis in that sort of capacity works for the first line. It allows for once they're in the zone, it allows for Blake to come in here and then immediately be a little bit more creative with things, can distribute the puck really well, right? And then that takes a little bit of pressure off of Aho. So I think that actual line combination would do really, really well. The other line, though, with Stankoven, Svechnikov, and Ehlers is because Ehlers, and what we've seen of Ehlers, he is a pass-first guy. He has scored on a couple of, I think it's 7 or 8 goals at this point. He's looked well doing it. But I think this would open, if there's a Bash brother, if you will, if there's a heavier guy like a Svechnikov on his line, I think that would make his life a little bit easier. Svechnikov is going to be one in the corners. Svechnikov's going to be one digging in the battles, and Stankoven goes in for support. And that allows for Ehlers to sort of kind of be in that high slot area, looking for shots on net, being able to rip them. But the great thing about having both Ehlers and Svechnikov is both of them can rip the puck. So even if Ehlers is battling with Stankoven in a board battle, Ehlers gets possession, he can pass the puck really well. He gets Svech is now going to have a little bit more a better opportunity to score based on the fact that there's a board battle in the corner. It comes up to an open guy, top face-off circles. Now he can get it on net, right? But it's also it's the complete reverse way as well. Svechnikov and Stankoven are also in a board battle. They also have that complete ability to look at Ehlers, who can also rip the puck as he needs to. I think that with how it is now, I think Blake is a very crafty. A little bit maybe. I think at the end of the day, you've got, if we were to break it down by like position type, right? You've got Blake, who is more like a dangler, playmaker-ish type style of play. You got Ehlers, who's straight playmaker, right? Playmaker being someone who can pass and has no issue shooting. And then you get Stankoven, who's a little bit more of an up and down lineman, right? He can sort of kind of play. You can put him at the fourth line, he'd be successful. You put him in the first line, he's going to be successful. I think he's coming into his own as center. He understands the responsibility. He does very well on that side of things. But what I personally think is a little bit of mixture on the top six would really help us out. So, and what I would do on the fourth line is I would sit down. Obviously, you still have Stahl on third line center, right? You're not moving that. I think you put Hall on one side, right? And then I think you put Courier on the other, right? That other line gives a little bit more stability to it, right? I think that at that point in time, there's a lot going right with the third line. Tyler Hall has a little bit more of a better sense of being able to score and make plays on that side. He can help Stahl get to the puck. Courier could still be a little bit more of a net front presence guy. There's a lot. I think that really solidifies that third line, right? Fourth line is when it becomes sort of kind of interesting, right? So you've got Robinson, you've got Martinook, which I think Martinook on the fourth line isn't a knock on him or isn't saying that anything is his fault. I think it brings a little bit more veteran presence to that fourth line in a style that benefits the Hurricanes, right? Sometimes it looks like that fourth line understands the idea of what they want for what Brind'Amour wants from them, but they're not able to consistently get it done. Where we know if we put Martinook out there, it's going to be done every single time. The same way we know we put the third line out there, we know that Stahl is going to do it every single time. When we put up the second line, we know that Blake and Stankoven are going to do it every single time. When we do the first time, we know that Jarvis and Aho. You have that. You go through each line. You say, I know that these group of players are going to be playing right every single time. And when they don't, it sticks out like the Rangers game, and we see it. So I just think that when we start looking at these line combinations, you really have to dissect the style of play that each player has and the chemistry that they sort of kind of have built along the way. Like Stankoven and Blake have got great chemistry, but so does Blake and Aho, right? So I don't have an issue moving him off. And I think that at this point, since Stankoven and Ehlers have built up some chemistry amongst themselves, now they can go through and sort of kind of see if they can have something with Svechnikov, right? So when you go through the offensive lines, because based on what I saw with Calgary, I just don't think that those lines are it anymore. But after that, the defensive pairings, right? Gothelsberg and Nichushkin, I think, should be playing together. That's probably, I would say that's your first line, to be honest with you. After that, and we have to understand what I mean by that when I say that, right? Gothelsberg is I think the best defenseman we have right now. Nichushkin, you don't want to put two weak defensemen, which is what we've been doing, on the same line at the same time, right? Because if they get caught out on a bad change in the second period, right, and now they're going up against the top unit, Nystrom and Nichushkin are going to struggle. They're going to have issues, right? So by splitting them up, right, you've got two good players that are playing with one another, and Nichushkin is now learning the ropes. Historically speaking, for the longest time, Slavin's always been paired up with the worst defenseman, and I think that Gothelsberg, mind you, he's not Slavin, a perfect replica of Slavin, but he is Slavin-like. He makes good defensive plays. He's got a little bit more of an offensive flair than Slavin does, but it works, right? After that, I think you put Keanu Miller and Chatfield together. Or either Chatfield or Walker. I think either one of them play really, really well. It would fit in with Keanu Miller. I think that Keanu Miller brings that go get him type of mentality. That pushing the puck, pushing the pace of play. If the puck's on his stick in the offensive zone, he's going to be ripping a shot. Those types of things help out the Hurricanes dramatically, right? And then after that, Nystrom and either Chatty or Walker fill out that last pairing, right? And I think what you're trying to do is you need consistency. You want defense is very different than offense, right? Defensive pairings you really want there to be, because of how Brennan rolls each line. You want the defensive units to be consistent. You want if this was a game, right? You'd want 85 average for all three lines. You want to make sure that if the third defensive pairing gets stuck up against, the top line, that they can handle that responsibility. So it's those are the types of adjustments and changes I think have to be made for the Hurricanes to enter in a consistent level at this point in time. Because at the end of the day, if you take away anything from this video, is Hurricanes right now aren't playing consistently. Like they'll look good, like with the Flames. Perfect example. First period they looked pretty good. Second period they dropped off hard, which is not normally like the Hurricanes. And then the third period it was sort of like a teeter toss. So it kind of went back and forth a little bit before they won it in overtime. So you want a more consistent effort, consistent play. It doesn't matter who they're playing. And right now, I think the lines are just stale. I feel like putting Jarvis and Svechnikov together isn't the ticket. I feel like if it was, we would see more production from Svechnikov. Because this kind of feels like Jarvis and Aho are sort of doing their own thing, getting their points, doing what they need to do. But that other person on that wing isn't contributing in a way that's meaningful or helpful to the team. And that's why there's so many issues right now. Is when it was Ehlers was trying to figure out the system. Honestly, I don't think it'd be a bad idea to now put Ehlers up in that position. I think that he sort of kind of worked out the kinks in his game, understands more of how he needs to play. But I also think that right now, where he's at, if they were not to change anything, he's sort of kind of like thriving in that mentorship that he's having with both Blake and Stankoven being the second-year pro. But either way, I think that the Hurricanes, they're treading in the right direction. It looks like after back-to-back starts with Bussy that I'm hoping right now at least that he's going to be our go-to guy until something changes there. But I think that, the Hurricanes are doing what they need to do. So, with all that being said, enough rambling from me. I really appreciate you guys watching. Like I said, there's going to be a couple changes coming up in these next couple of weeks. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know things you think I should do better, things that you want to talk about. So, but anyway, guys, have a good one. Thank you.